I got home earlier than usual that day. Maybe that's where it all started. It wasn't planned. My last client canceled last minute, and the freeway actually cooperated for once. No calls, no distractions. I pulled into our driveway around 4:45 p.m. Thinking I'd surprise Amber with takeout from that Thai place she liked, the one with the ridiculous wait times. I even grabbed her favorite, those mango spring rolls she always claimed were too sweet, but devoured every time. I opened the front door expecting to hear the usual music playing from her office upstairs, the soft hum of the dishwasher, maybe the scent of that lavender diffuser she used religiously. Instead, I walked into stillness. That alone would have been enough to raise an eyebrow. But it was the coat that stopped me in my tracks. A dark gray wool coat hung on the hook just inside the entryway. It wasn't mine. I don't own anything like it. This thing looked expensive, tailored, sharp, practically designer. It was neatly placed, too. Hung with care. Not dropped in a hurry. Not forgotten. Like whoever owned it had time to get comfortable. And then there was the scent. God, that scent. It hit me the second I stepped closer. A cologne I didn't recognize. Masculine, powerful. Something you'd smell on a magazine page or walking past a lawyer's office downtown. Definitely not mine. Definitely not anything Amber had ever worn. I just stood there for a moment, keys still in hand, my pulse starting to pick up. My first thought wasn't even what you'd expect. It wasn't, is she cheating? It was, maybe someone stopped by? Maybe her brother, though he never wore anything that refined. Maybe someone from work, though Amber worked remotely. And even if it was someone dropping off papers or swinging by for a quick visit, why would their coat be inside? Why would they need to take it off? I listened. The house was silent. Not nobody's home silent, a different kind. Heavy. Like the air itself didn't want to move. I walked further in, each footstep louder than it should have been. That coat, though, I kept looking back at it. I couldn't make myself look away for too long. Felt like it was watching me. Then the shower shut off upstairs. I froze. The timing was too perfect. The water had clearly been running, not just turned on for effect. I hadn't heard it initially, probably because I'd been so focused on the coat. But now, with the house quiet again, the click of the water shutting off echoed. I took a breath. My brain went into overdrive, trying to explain it away, trying to protect me from what I was already starting to believe. Maybe Amber had gotten cold and taken a shower mid-afternoon. Weird, but not impossible. She worked from home. She had freedom. Maybe nothing. Footsteps padded across the floor above me. Then she appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a pale green towel, her hair dripping, skin flushed from the heat. She froze when she saw me. "Oh, you're home early," she said, blinking like I'd materialized out of nowhere. There was a flicker in her expression. Not fear, not guilt, something else. Like a window she'd forgotten to close before a storm hit. Her face adjusted quickly, slipping into something softer. She smiled, that easy, composed smile she'd practiced 1,000 times before. I was just about to hop on a quick Zoom, last-minute brainstorm with the team. You know how marketing is, everyone gets inspired at the worst times. I nodded slowly, watching her. She descended the stairs, towel clutched a little too tightly around her, strands of hair clinging to her shoulders. I wanted to reach for her, but something stopped me. She passed by the coat like it wasn't even there. Didn't glance at it, didn't acknowledge it. Like it belonged. Like I was the one imagining things. "Everything okay?" she asked, moving toward the kitchen, not waiting for an answer. "You're looking at me like I've got two heads." "I just didn't know you had company," I said, trying to sound casual. The words stuck in my throat. She turned, towel still snug, one hand resting on the kitchen island. Her face was calm, too calm. "Company? No. Why?" "That coat by the door," I said, gesturing. Her eyes flicked toward it, and for the briefest moment, I saw something crack. It was subtle, a fraction of a second, but her pupils narrowed, and her jaw tensed just a bit. "Oh, that," she said, shrugging. "It's Lisa's. Her boyfriend dropped it off earlier when he came to pick up that monitor we borrowed. He left it behind, I guess. He's always forgetting stuff. Lisa, the coworker she always claimed was chaotic but sweet. I had never met her boyfriend. I didn't even know his name. He wears men's cologne? Amber blinked again, a little slower this time. I guess? I didn't exactly sniff him. Why are you being weird? I let out a laugh, trying to keep it light. Just surprised, that's all. I thought you were working all day. She raised an eyebrow. I was. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. The silence stretched. Eventually, she moved past me, brushing my shoulder lightly. I'll tell Lisa to grab it next time she's over, she said, voice steady. I watched her walk away, watched the way she tucked a damp strand of hair behind her ear like nothing had happened. Like there wasn't a coat still hanging in our hallway that didn't belong in our life. That night, I barely touched my dinner. Amber talked about her meeting, about a new client with a big product launch, about Q3 targets and market repositioning. It all sounded like background noise, like the hum of a fan when you're trying to sleep, because I couldn't stop thinking about the coat. Even after she went to bed, I stayed downstairs. I sat on the edge of the couch, lights dim, staring at that hook, at the shape of the shoulders, the stitching on the sleeves, the subtle curve where it had been worn by someone else. The scent still lingered. I considered calling Lisa. I had her number. Amber had given it to me once during a group trip. But what would I say? Hey, weird question. Is this your boyfriend's coat? Even if she said yes, how could I believe it? Amber could have prepped her. Could have had that whole excuse ready to go. No, the moment to ask had passed. Instead, I just sat there, the room dim and quiet. The coat felt louder than any voice. It wasn't just an object. It was a fracture, a warning, a message, slipped between the lines of our life. Quiet, subtle, and absolutely unmistakable. I just hadn't figured out how loud it was going to get. The coat was just the beginning. It planted something in me, a discomfort I couldn't shake. And once that seed was there, it didn't stop growing. I started noticing things, not new things exactly, but old ones I'd ignored or explained away for too long. A pattern started to emerge, built out of half memories and fragments I hadn't thought twice about at the time. Like how Amber always sat in her car for a few minutes before coming inside. I'd assume she was decompressing, maybe finishing a call, maybe just scrolling for a minute before stepping back into real life. But now I wondered, who was she texting? Who was she talking to that she didn't want to carry into our home? There was her phone, too. Always face down on the table. Always silent. At first, I chalked it up to work boundaries. She claimed her team was chaotic, and the group chat was always blowing up, so she kept it muted. I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to. But then I started noticing how it always stayed muted, especially when she went upstairs to shower, or when we were watching a movie together, or when we had dinner. I'd catch the glow of the screen lighting up behind the darkened glass, and she'd instinctively reach over and flip it farther from view, barely missing a beat in whatever she was saying. At first, these were just suspicions, incomplete, but they started to link together, like the sudden uptick in team dinners. Amber's job had always been mostly remote. She hated in-person meetings. I remember when her company held a 3-day offsite last year, and she came home every night drained, swearing she'd quit if they made her do that more than once a year. I work better in pajama pants and quiet, she said. And yet lately, she was going out more, twice a week, sometimes 3, always under the pretense of networking, brainstorming, bonding with coworkers she used to make fun of for having corporate buzzword energy. I'd ask casual questions, nothing accusatory, like who was going or where they were meeting. Her answers were usually vague. Oh, just the usual crowd, she'd say, or some new folks from the marketing team. She never named names, never offered photos, just summaries, generic, harmless. But the gaps in the stories started to stand out more than the stories themselves. There was one night in particular that started to really eat at me. A Thursday. She'd said she had a team dinner downtown and wouldn't be home until late. That wasn't new. She'd said the same thing the week before. I didn't think much of it until around 10 p.m. when I went to the kitchen to grab a snack and noticed her work laptop open on the dining table. The screen was asleep, but the time showed clearly 10:03 p.m. and her Slack notifications were up. The last message from Jen T. had come through just after 8 o'clock, asking if Amber had sent over the Q3 mockups. A follow-up message from Jen, timestamped 10 minutes later, just said, "You good?" I stared at the screen. It didn't make sense. If Amber was at a team dinner, why were her coworkers messaging her like she was supposed to be working? Why didn't Jen know she was out with the team? I didn't mention it when she got home. She walked in around 11:30, makeup still fresh, dressed just a bit sharper than usual. Not like someone who'd been eating overpriced tacos with coworkers. Like someone who'd been seen. Someone who had dressed to be noticed. And maybe she had been. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, almost absent-minded, and said, "You're still up?" With a half smile. "Yeah, just watching something," I replied. "How was dinner?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "Long, productive. You know how it is." No, I thought. I don't think I do. It all started to add up. Too much, too fast. There was her laughter behind closed doors, those phone calls in the bedroom or in her office where she'd laugh a little too freely, then hang up the second I walked in. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd wave it off. Just Jen. Or just catching up with Lisa. Always someone conveniently familiar. Always a quick exit from the conversation. And the affection, the physical closeness, it had changed, too. I didn't realize it at first, or maybe I didn't want to, but it felt rehearsed, like she was going through the motions. Kiss before bed. A hand on my shoulder when she passed by. A hug that lasted a second too short. The warmth was gone. It had become mechanical, polite. I started to wonder when I had stopped being her partner and started becoming part of the furniture. That weekend, we went out to brunch. Her idea, actually, maybe a guilt offering. She was unusually cheerful, checking her phone a bit more than usual, but smiling, laughing. When we sat down at the table, I noticed she angled her phone away from me and set it face down again. "Everything okay at work?" I asked, keeping it light. She nodded. "Just people blowing up the group chat. You know how it is." I smiled and sipped my coffee. "You always say that, but I don't think I do know how it is." She blinked, caught off guard, but recovered quickly. "It's just chaos. You don't want to know. Trust me." She was good. I'll give her that. I watched her across the table, really watched her. Her eyes didn't hold mine long. Her smile didn't reach the corners of her face. Her fingers tapped her phone once, then again. Then she flipped it over and put it in her lap. The rest of the meal passed with normal conversation, weekend plans, work updates, maybe a vacation in the fall. But it all felt like a script. Like she was reading from a page that had been written hours before. When we got home, she went upstairs to finish up some work. I stayed behind in the kitchen, just staring at the wall, thinking about how this used to be the part of the weekend I looked forward to. Quiet time together, errands, maybe a movie. But now it felt like we were actors in a play with no audience. That night, I did something I'd never done before. While she was asleep, I went to her office. Her laptop was there, closed, charger still plugged in. I didn't open it. I didn't go through her phone. I didn't cross any lines, not yet. But I sat in her chair. I stared at the closed screen, and I asked myself a question I hadn't dared to ask until then. What if she's already gone? Not physically, but emotionally, mentally. What if I was the only one still trying to make this feel real? What if everything she said, every "I love you," every plan, every smile, had become a performance? The next morning, I got up early and went for a run. I needed to clear my head, to find something that felt like mine again. As my feet hit the pavement, memory after memory flashed through my head. Small things I'd forgotten, or maybe had forced myself to forget. The missed calls, the weekend work trips, the way she always came home smelling faintly different. Like soap that wasn't ours, or cologne she couldn't explain. There had been signs. So many signs. I'd just chosen to trust her. Chosen to believe that love meant faith, even when that faith was being slowly, carefully eroded. I realized something as I ran past a familiar intersection. One we used to walk together every Sunday. The signs were never missing. I just hadn't wanted to read them. By the time Amber invited me to her company event, I already knew what I was looking for. I just didn't know if I'd be ready to find it. She brought it up like it was nothing. You should come to the rooftop mixer next Friday. Everyone's bringing their partners. Her voice was light, casual, almost dismissive, like she didn't expect me to say yes. I almost didn't, but then I thought, maybe this was the only way I'd ever know for sure. Maybe being there, seeing her in her other world, the one she kept carefully separate from me, would show me what she wouldn't say out loud. I didn't tell her that. I just smiled and said, sure, sounds fun. The night of the event, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror longer than I should have. Buttoned the same shirt twice. Changed my watch. Tried to look like the version of me Amber used to reach for without hesitation. The one who once felt chosen. We drove separately. She'd gone ahead early to help set up, which was convenient. I took my time getting there. Part of me hoped traffic would give me an excuse to turn around. But I kept going. Each red light was a countdown I wasn't sure I was ready for. The venue was a rooftop space downtown. All string lights and cocktail tables. Trendy enough to feel expensive. Casual enough to pretend it wasn't. I walked in and scanned the crowd. Everyone looked polished, relaxed, mid-conversation, mid-laugh. No one noticed me, which was perfect. I wanted to see before I was seen. I moved along the edge of the party, past the bar, past the catered sushi and sliders, my eyes searching. And then I saw her, Amber. She was standing near the far end of the patio, backlit by warm lights and city glow, a drink in hand. And next to her, no, with her, was a man I didn't recognize. Tall, well-dressed, confident posture, smiling like they were the only two people on the rooftop. Amber's hand was resting lightly on his chest. Not accidentally, not briefly. His hand hovered at her lower back, close enough to count as int asterisk mate, distant enough to pass as friendly if you weren't looking too hard. She laughed at something he said. That specific laugh I hadn't heard in months. The unfiltered one. Her shoulders relaxed. Her body leaned toward him like gravity was on his side. And for a moment, the noise of the party faded. The music, the chatter, the clinking glasses, gone. All I could hear was the pulse in my ears and the sound of every excuse I'd told myself shattering in my head. I didn't move. I didn't cause a scene. I just stood there, silent, tucked behind a potted plant like a ghost in my own marriage. Eventually, she looked up, saw me. The color in her face changed. Not dramatically, just enough, like a curtain pulling halfway shut. Her body tensed, and she dropped her hand a few inches, just enough to pretend the moment wasn't what it had been. She didn't wave me over. She didn't even smile. Instead, she stepped back from him, turned slightly, and whispered something I couldn't hear. He nodded, handed her the drink, and walked off toward the bar. She straightened her posture like nothing had happened and made her way toward me. "Hey," she said with a wide smile, a little too bright. "You made it." "Of course," I said, keeping my voice steady. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. Quick, no pressure, no warmth. "Did you just get here?" "Just now." Her eyes flicked over my shoulder like she was checking for who else might have seen. "I was just chatting with David from operations. He's hilarious." "David?" "Sure." I nodded. "Seems like it." She glanced toward the bar, then back to me. "Want a drink?" "I'm good." She hesitated. "Everyone's dying to meet you. Come say hi?" I followed her as she led me through clusters of colleagues, introducing me in that polished, effortless way she used at weddings or corporate dinners. "This is my husband, Jason." Always Jason. Never Jay. Never the name she used when we were alone. Each greeting was smooth, efficient, like I was a name tag she was required to wear. We made it about 20 minutes. I smiled. I nodded. I shook hands with people I'd never heard of. But all I could think about was him. The way her body language had shifted. The kind of closeness that didn't happen by accident. Eventually, she got pulled into a conversation with someone from HR, and I slipped away. Drifted back toward the railing overlooking the city. Alone. I watched traffic roll by below. It was easier than watching her. I don't know how long I stood there, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20, but I remember the moment it hit me. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, brutal one. I wasn't imagining anything. I hadn't been crazy. I wasn't being paranoid. It was real. All of it. And it had been real for a long time. I leaned on the railing, staring down at a city that felt suddenly foreign. A place where my life had twisted in ways I couldn't untangle. Where the woman I loved had turned into someone I couldn't recognize, or worse, someone I had recognized all along, and just didn't want to admit it. There was no ambiguity left. No benefit of the doubt. No maybe she's just tired or maybe I'm overthinking. I had seen it, with my own eyes, felt the shift in her presence, heard the difference in her laughter. That night wasn't a discovery. It was confirmation, and in some strange way that made it easier. Because doubt is a slow poison. It eats you alive one thought at a time. But truth, no matter how painful, is clean. It hurts, yes, but it ends the guessing. When Amber came back to find me later, she acted like nothing had changed. She asked if I was enjoying myself. I told her I had to head out early, an early client call. She nodded, kissed me again on the cheek, and said she'd see me at home. I left without saying goodbye to anyone. In the car, I didn't cry. I didn't punch the steering wheel or scream or spiral. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, the city lights reflecting in the windshield, and let the weight settle in. Not rage, not grief, just a deep, quiet clarity. Whatever this was, this life we had built, this version of us. It was over. It just hadn't ended yet. I didn't leave right away. After I stepped away from Amber, after her kiss on the cheek and her practiced smile, I found a quiet corner by a planter near the edge of the rooftop. From where I stood, I could see most of the party unfold in little vignettes. Laughter over cocktails, co-workers leaning in too close, shallow conversations pretending to be meaningful. Amber had gone back to the man. Not immediately, no. She did a loop, mingled, chatted with a few women from her team. But eventually, predictably, like a tide returning to shore, she gravitated back to him. And there it was again. That same posture, that tilt of the head, that way she smiled, half hidden behind her glass, like a secret meant only for him. I stayed in the shadows, arms crossed, my back against the wall. Not hiding exactly, just not announcing myself. No one noticed me, and that felt right. I didn't belong in that version of her world. I never had. I just hadn't realized it until now. A few people walked by, offering polite nods, but no one stopped. Until she did. Her name was Eliza. She wasn't dramatic about it. She didn't swoop in with some knowing look or offer a shoulder like a movie cliché. She just appeared next to me, holding a small plate of fruit skewers and an untouched glass of red wine. "Mind if I stand here?" she asked. I shook my head. Not at all. She didn't ask me what I was doing or why I looked like a man bracing for a storm that had already passed through. She just stood beside me, watching the city below for a minute. "Corporate events are the worst," she said after a pause. "Everyone pretending they aren't watching each other." I gave a dry laugh. You'd think after years of this, they'd get better at faking it. She glanced at me. "You're not faking anything. That's rare here." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. I just offered a half smile and looked back out over the balcony. She didn't push. Just let the silence sit between us like a gentle buffer. It wasn't awkward. It was grounding. After a while, she added, "You're Jason, right? Amber's husband?" I turned my head. Her voice hadn't carried any edge, no judgment, just simple acknowledgement. I nodded. "I thought so," she said. "She's mentioned you. Hopefully in a good light." Eliza smiled, but it was the kind of smile that held too much understanding to be innocent. "She talks about you like someone recalling an old photograph, like something that meant something once." I didn't say anything. She glanced back toward the crowd. "I've worked with her for 3 years. We're not close, but I notice things. A lot of people do. They just pretend not to." Her honesty caught me off guard. Most people danced around that kind of truth, wrapping it in disclaimers. But not Eliza. She just said it plainly. You see things too, she said. That's why you're standing over here instead of playing along. I looked over at Amber again. She was laughing. Not with the man this time, he'd stepped away, but with a small group of coworkers. Her eyes scanned the crowd every so often, like she was keeping tabs. She's good at keeping me where she wants me, I said. Just close enough to claim, never close enough to matter. Eliza didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "That's not about you. That's about her." I turned my head toward her, curious. She met my gaze evenly. Some people build whole identities on being admired. But the second someone actually sees them, really sees them, they panic. They either run or they break you down so they can feel safe again. I blinked, unsure how someone who barely knew me had managed to describe my marriage in one sentence. "You're a therapist or something?" I asked, only half joking. Eliza laughed softly. "I'm in data strategy, but I pay attention." The conversation shifted after that, gently, without forcing itself into anything deeper. We talked about music, about the brutal rooftop wind that kept knocking over the centerpieces, about how bad the wine was. Nothing flirtatious, nothing suggestive, just two people standing next to each other in a space where everything else felt artificial. Eventually, I checked my watch. I should head out. Eliza nodded. "Take care, Jason." I hesitated, then said, "Thank you for not pretending." She nodded again. "You're welcome. And hey, don't let anyone make you feel invisible, especially not someone who promised to see you." That sentence stayed with me all the way home. Over the next few days, Eliza lingered in my thoughts, not as a what-if or a distraction, but as something simpler, a tether to reality. The way she spoke to me felt like fresh air after months of breathing through a filter. There had been no performance in her, just presence. We didn't talk again right away. I didn't even have her number. But 3 days later, I got a message on LinkedIn, of all places. Just a short note. "Hey, I'm not great at pretending things didn't happen. So, it was good to meet you. If you ever want to talk, you know where to find me." No emojis. No subtext. Just honesty. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "It was good meeting you too. I might take you up on that." And eventually I did. Our messages started slow. A few lines here and there. Nothing romantic. Nothing even flirtatious. Just human. She asked about my work, about my music tastes, about my favorite spots in the city to disappear into. I asked about her career, her dog who apparently hates car rides but insists on them anyway, and whether she believed in second chances, not in relationships, but in rebuilding yourself. And through all of it, she never once pushed for more. Never asked about Amber. Never asked for details I wasn't ready to share. Instead, she offered something that I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. Space. Space to be myself without having to audition for affection. Space to feel seen without being judged. Space to exist without having to explain why I felt so hollow inside. Amber, for her part, didn't seem to notice the shift. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. She went on with her routines, her late meetings, her glowing phone screen, her half-hearted small talk. I stopped asking where she was going. Stopped waiting up. Stopped keeping track of the lies she was trying to keep straight. I spent more time out. Not with Eliza, not with anyone. Just walking. Going to coffee shops I'd forgotten about. Sitting in bookstores I used to visit before life became a series of compromises. I started writing again, just notes, fragments of thoughts that didn't have to go anywhere. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized I was starting to come back to myself. Not the man Amber had shaped or neglected. Not the husband waiting for breadcrumbs. But me, the version of myself I'd misplaced trying to hold our life together. Eliza was still there. Not often. Not demanding. But steady. Like a soft hum beneath the noise. Her texts weren't frequent. But they always came when I needed them. A quote. A song recommendation. A simple hope today felt like progress. She wasn't trying to save me. She was reminding me I didn't need to be rescued. And that somehow meant more than anything else. I didn't tell anyone about her. Not yet. This wasn't a rebound or a replacement. It wasn't even a story. It was a connection, quiet and grounding, that reminded me what it felt like to be treated with dignity. Amber still hadn't confessed, still hadn't slipped. But I wasn't waiting for that anymore. The truth didn't need her permission to exist. I'd already seen enough. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to see myself again too. I didn't explode. No confrontation. No slamming doors. No shouting matches in the kitchen. That's not how it happened. That's not who I became. Instead, I went quiet. And that silence? That was the beginning of everything changing. There's something powerful about stillness when someone expects chaos. Amber didn't know what to do with it. She was prepared for a fight, not for my disinterest. When I stopped asking her where she was going, when I stopped waiting up, when I stopped trying to insert myself into her excuses, I could see her starting to flinch in the quiet. She'd say things like, "You've been quiet lately?" Or, "Everything okay with you?" In this tone, like she was fishing for a confrontation, something she could use to make me the problem. I'd just smile and say, "I'm good." And I meant it, because for the first time in months I really was. I started waking up early again. Not for work, just for me. I'd make coffee and take it to the back deck before the sun was up, just sitting there listening to the morning breathe. I began running again, short distances at first, then longer. I hadn't realized how much I'd let myself shrink in the name of stability. The kind of slow erosion where you don't notice what's missing until you start filling it back in. Amber didn't notice the changes at first. Or maybe she noticed and didn't care. Her life continued on like a script she was reading without looking up. She still had her late meetings, her networking events, her phones turned face down. The difference was, I didn't chase her anymore. I stopped asking if she wanted me to come along. Stopped texting, "Let me know when you're heading home." I let her live the life she was already living, without pretending I had a place in it. I cleaned out the garage one weekend, pulled down old boxes, reorganized tools I hadn't touched in a year. It sounds small, but it was something I'd been putting off forever. Partly because she always found something better for us to do, and partly because I never made myself a priority. This time, I put on music and spent 2 days out there in silence, rebuilding something that had once belonged to me. Amber came out on the second day, holding her phone, half distracted. "Wow," she said. "You've been productive." I nodded. Felt good to get my space back. She tilted her head like she didn't understand what I meant. Maybe she didn't. Maybe that was the first crack in her illusion, realizing I wasn't orbiting her anymore. The texts with Eliza didn't turn romantic. Not then. Not even close. She wasn't a temptation or a rebound. She was a mirror. Every few days we'd check in. Sometimes about nothing, a meme, a song, a line from a book. Sometimes about everything. One night, she asked me, "What does peace look like to you now?" I stared at that question longer than I cared to admit. I started typing 3 different answers and deleted each one. Eventually I just replied, "Still figuring that out, but I know it doesn't look like walking on eggshells in my own home." She didn't respond right away. When she did, it was simple. "Then you're already closer than most." And that stayed with me. The turning point, the real one, came on a Tuesday. Just another quiet weeknight. Amber was upstairs, working on a presentation for a client she used to complain about. I was in the kitchen making dinner. Pasta, something basic. The kind of meal we used to cook together when money was tight and we still laughed at each other's jokes. I had Spotify playing softly. A familiar song came on. One we danced to once in our tiny living room, barefoot on the hardwood, when we still thought forever was a given. I paused, spatula in hand, waiting for some kind of memory to rise. Something warm. But it wasn't there. All I felt was the ghost of a life that didn't exist anymore. And then my phone buzzed. It was a screech *T from a friend I hadn't seen in months, Scott. We drifted, mostly because Amber had always found reasons not to like him. Said he was too negative, or stuck in the past. So I'd let the friendship fade to keep the peace. But the message that night, it was a photo someone had posted from Amber's office. It was her, laughing, glass in hand, arms slung around a man I didn't recognize. The same man from the rooftop. Again. Her body angled toward him. Too close. Too familiar. Too not accidental. Scott's message was just one line. I thought you said everything was fine. I stared at the photo for a long time. Not because it was a shock, but because it wasn't. And that was what finally broke something in me. Not in the way that hurts. Not in the way you have to scream into your pillow to survive. It was more like clarity cutting through a fog I'd been pretending didn't exist. I wasn't angry. I wasn't surprised. I was done. Not with rage. With certainty. After that, things shifted again. Not externally, but inside me. I stopped holding back pieces of myself in conversations. I started texting old friends. Rebuilding connections I had let Amber chip away at slowly over the years. I even reconnected with my brother, which surprised both of us. He asked how I was doing, and I told him the truth. Getting there, I said, and for once, I didn't mean it as a cover. I also started writing again. Nothing serious. Just journaling, thoughts, fragments of memory and feeling. I wrote about the night Amber forgot our anniversary and claimed she had a deadline. I wrote about how she started calling me Babe Less and Jason Moore. I wrote about how she started saying, I'm just tired, instead of, I love you. Writing made it real, made it harder to excuse. One evening, as I flipped through my journal, I stumbled on an entry from early in our marriage. It was about a camping trip we took up north. Rainy, muddy, cold, but perfect. We huddled in the tent, played cards, and talked about everything. I had written, I feel like she sees me, like she really knows who I am. Reading that now, I realized something awful. She hadn't stopped seeing me. She had stopped caring that I was disappearing. Then came the final fracture. One of Amber's co-workers, someone I'd met maybe twice, DM'd me on Instagram. A woman named Sophie. We hadn't followed each other. The message was short. Hey, I'm sorry to overstep, but you deserve to know. Amber's been making jokes about you in meetings, calling you her roommate and saying she has a whole second life. It didn't feel right keeping quiet. I stared at the message. Read it again. Let it land. She was mocking me, publicly, casually, turning me into a punchline while I still brought her coffee and folded the laundry. I didn't cry. I didn't even reply. I just closed the app,